Tonight is a debate on the opposition.
Don't talk on the phone.
Please invite a friend. We want to welcome our viewers from across the globe. We got a lineup of some exciting individuals that are going to be debating tonight on the topic: does the Liberian opposition, the current opposition, represent a credible and viable alternative to the Weah administration? Gentlemen, welcome to Focus on Liberia. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to yet another edition of Focus on Liberia. We are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight, we're going to be discussing or debating the topic: does the Liberian opposition bloc present a credible and a viable alternative to the George Weah administration? For that and more, I want to bring on my guest co-host, Mr. Ansoni Sie, who's going to talk about the topic tonight and also introduce our guest. Mr. Sie.
Dennis, as always, thank you. Folks in cyberspace, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. As we go into our topic for the day, we have brought in Mr. Edward Doe. Edward Doe is now a new advocate in the Liberian community. And we have Mr. Larama Yunton. Larama Yunton is an outstanding young man who has been providing some perspectives on a lot of national issues. He's here, and we will be hearing from him. We will also be hearing from Mr. Edward Doe. For today's topic, you heard Dennis Jag, we will be going deep into the opposition. And the question here is, does the opposition represent or present a viable alternative to the current administration, which is the George Weah-led government? And so the opposition is under the microscope today. To do this, again, we have Edward Doe and Lara Mayenton. Dennis Jag, I think our guests are set. How do we start this?
Let's do this. And we want to welcome our viewers from across the globe. This is not the first time we have opposition. We have always had opposition. Liberia has had elections since 1847. We've been having elections. We've been having opposition parties. They may not be free sometimes, but there has always been opposition. And most of the time, what we find out is we are so much in a hurry to change administration that we don't thoroughly vet our opposition. Okay, so sometimes the one in power is performing so badly that you just want to get them out and replace them without actually knowing who you're replacing them with. So we want to take time long before election 2020, 2023 to look at the Liberian opposition. At this time, we have two guests, both of whom are not fans of the George Weah administration. But where they differ is the opposition. Does the opposition present that viable and credible alternative to the George Weah administration? One person said yes, another person said no. So we're going to begin tonight by asking the question, and what we will do is we will have Mr. Edward Doe go first on the question, and followed by Mr. Yunton. Each will have 2 minutes to present your side why you think the opposition represent or does not represent a viable alternative to the Weah administration. After that, you're going to have rebuttal for a 1 hour, 1 minute, 30 seconds. You will have questions from us, and then you both will engage each other in questions before we bring in our audience. So at this time, from our coin toss, Mr. Edward Doe will go first. The question is, does the Liberian opposition, the current opposition, and by opposition we mean the ANC, the UP, the LP, the ALP, and all the opposition parties, including the coalition or collaborating political parties, the CPP. Does the opposition has a bloc represent that credible and viable alternative to the Weah administration? Mr. Doe.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you again, Dennis Ja and Sia, for welcoming and bringing me on this show so that we can debate and discuss the question that you put before us. Does the opposition have a credible and viable alternative? To answer your question, I'll say no. The opposition is not a credible and viable alternative. From my observation is that they haven't convinced the voters in Liberia, on the issues. Furthermore, too, they have not really presented themselves as a strong opposition. That is, there is so much, back and forth within the opposition bloc. For instance, the CPP, the coalition that they formed, is breaking up. They are, arguing among themselves. There is no real one leader, that can speak for the opposition per se. We have made a lot of mistakes in the first couple of months, 12 months under. And the opposition have not taken advantage of that to really grill Weah on that. The opposition tactics they are using is that they like to do and use protest as a means to voice their opinion. But you need to really hit the airwaves. You need to really write also. What you stand on some of the issues that we are is messing up. The mismanagement, the salary issues, his many trips. Where else? A number of things that they would have, hit Weah on. They're not doing that doing that. So I don't find them very convincing for the voters. And then also too, even though the voters in Liberia do not vote on policy and also on issues, but the opposition, they find themselves to be the intelligentsia, the educated ones. They need to put forth some policies. They need to put forth some credible, issues that they can discuss. Let the people know where they stand on certain issues. And they're not doing that. Cummins is not doing that. Euro is not doing that. Boyka is not doing that. And the 9 years. So I don't find them to be a credible and viable alternative to the Weah administration. I still have doubts, and I'm sure majority of the voters I have doubts about them, and I don't think they trust them that much too either.
Mr. Doe.
Yes.
I just listened to you. Our audience did listen to you also. Is your main point with the opposition?
Hold on, Mr. C. Let Mr. Yonton go first, and then we'll,
okay.
Before Mr. Yonton get in a fair advantage. Mr. Yonton, your answer to that question.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I want to say thank you to Focus on Liberia and the management, and to Liberians, both in the diaspora and across Liberia. This presents a very important discussion, a very important topic as we move towards 2020 and 2023 elections. The answer to my question, to this proposition previously in the question, is yes. I know there are conditions and problems highlighted by my proponent regarding the challenges faced by opposition. But I will agree that the opposition can be and will be a viable alternative in 2023. And let's not forget that the premise of this question is not mutually exclusive, because we have to consider other factors that characterize the social nature and dynamic context of our body politics today. And if we were to consider on the basis of reasoning, we also know that in which is viable is an alternative. So therefore, the ruling party in itself can be an alternative to itself. So we are made to ask the question fundamentally, can the ruling party also be a viable alternative and a viable incumbency to defeat the opposition in 2023? And if the answer is no, that shows that the opposition indeed could be a viable alternative towards the 2023 election. The second point I'd like to make is that we're not going to have the discussion in a vacuum. It is important to know that if we look at the context of viable alternative, it is not subjective. It should be an absolute term that will incorporate all of the other different factors that we have to look at, as we go along in this discussion. And if that were to happen, you realize that the opposition has been basically playing the role of opposition, because if we critically define the critical role of the opposition in this context of our modern young democracy, you realize that its function is clearly directed towards checkmating the actions and policies of government, which we've seen in some of the leaders across the collaborating parties. And the third point I'd like to make is just a disclaimer quickly, that I do not represent as a spokesperson for the CPP, neither do I represent a spokesperson for any of the collaborating parties within the CPP. But as a member of the opposition community, I think it is incumbent upon me to dissect some of the burning issues affecting our country. And we are having this discussion right at the time where our nation economy is down. A lot of our young people are out of jobs. Average basic income has swept away by almost 48%. That is according to the Central Bank of Liberia in 2018. Household income has also swept away by 47%. And our Liberian people are the victim of the second census that we saw and witnessed in 2017 general election, that a new party that came to power promised to be the change has not been the change. So let's have this discussion on a balanced scale about some of the promises of this government and how they have failed on it versus the opposition and what we expect them to do.
Thank you, Mr. Yanton.
I think both of you are in agreement that you don't think the current administration has performed well. So that is not in disagreement. What we are disagreeing about tonight, or you both are disagreeing on tonight, is the opposition. So, Mr. Doe, I want to go back to you for a rebuttal, and then Mr. Yanton will give his rebuttal.
Well, Mr. Yanton mentioned a couple of things. He said that the opposition he answered the question as yes, that the opposition is a viable alternative. I'm not sure whether Mr. Yanton understands what an opposition means and what does it mean to be an opposition, whatsoever. Mr. Yanton also said that opposition is doing all their best, holding this government accountable and things of that nature. I don't understand that comment at all, because looking at opposition, I don't find them to be a watchdog for this current administration. And also, too, they are not checking the public officials' activities at all. I don't find them doing that on a regular basis. They're not holding the current administration accountable. They let the current administration get away with a lot of things without saying a word. So you cannot be an opposition and don't play those critical role. So I don't understand how Mr. Yanton would say this opposition is a viable opposition when they're not playing the role of an opposition. I don't get that.
Mr. Doe, before we bring Yanton in, I think Yanton said could. He said the opposition could be a viable alternative. And that means he is trying to suggest that if they do certain things and put certain things into place, then they can be that viable alternative. But
you can't answer the question and say yes and then say cool again. Cool is an operating word there. And you can't answer the question and say yes, they are viable or alternative, but there are conditions, that they can become viable if they fulfill those conditions. No, then it's not a sum all fallacy question that you ask. It's a question that is very much direct and it needs a yes or no answer.
All right, then we'll bring Yanton in so that he can defend himself on that. Comrade Yanton, you said that the opposition could or can be a viable alternative to the current administration because, in your words, the current administration, if I can paraphrase you, is not up to the task. So how can the opposition be a viable alternative, like you said?
First, let me state that the role of the opposition is clear. The fundamental role of the opposition is to checkmate and to make sure that government feed its place to the fire in terms of their actions, their inactions, as well as policies and laws that affect the people of Liberia. And the opposition under the Weah-led administration has taken steady steps towards not just effectuating themselves as an active body, but uniting themselves under a single umbrella. We saw in February 2018, just a year after we are some office, the crucial debate about the opposition is critical role to the advancement of the Liberian society in terms of all of the things the national urgency that we have was about whether the opposition can unite and forge a formal front in addressing some of the issues that confront our country. The constitution, political parties, the four major political parties demonstrated to the Liberian people that they can unite under a single umbrella, under a united front as the collaborating political parties. The point here is that I think what my brother Edward is trying to misunderstand in terms of my position is that we cannot blame the opposition for the excesses and the failure of this government. The opposition role is critical. We have seen opposition political parties in the form of the CPP having press conferences and giving their positions on national issues. We have seen individual members of the CCP, whether it's the Unity Party or the of the ANC, or even the All Liberian Party, giving individual positions on national issues. They do this to press conferences and to joining radicals across civil society organizations that are bent towards key issues of national concern. Take, for example, the issue of the how do you call it, the war crimes and economic crimes court. The opposition has made a position very clear that they do support. The leader of the ALP supports the establishment of war and economic crime court. Unity Party do support that, as well as the ANC, although the ANC, there are pictures of being an ANC that support that. The leader have not been very definitive on that, but they have been very clear in terms of economic projection, in terms of economic policy, in terms of bringing national issue on health and economic and education and other issues relating to Liberia. So the opposition have been very active within the space of under 2 years in terms of their own engagement and how they see positively they should engage the Liberian society. I think what Brother Doe is mistaken is the role of the opposition prior to this government. And the role of this opposition prior to this government has been based on protests and protests and protests. They did not provide a viable pathway to leadership. They were not a viable opposition that could have been the best alternative for Liberia in 2017. We saw that they launched 182, according to reports, 182 different protests in 12 years. So this opposition bloc is far more responsible than just protests. And it's important to also stress that the CPP is not the COP. The COP is a civil society organization. They have the right to protest and lead protests in any form, but they are not in any way synonymous of the CPP. So let's get us very good and clear.
Yeton, I'm thinking that Edward Doe's beef with the opposition bloc or the collaborating political parties is that in terms of organization, in terms of structure, they are not there yet. I think Edward Doe does not see why in his definition of a collaboration, he's yet to see that. And it's on that basis, he's saying that no, they don't represent a viable alternative, because to be a viable alternative, you must be structured. There must be agreements on principles, on policies, on things that you need to do, you know, how you will select your leaders. None of these things have been put into place yet. I think that's where Edward Doe is coming from. You want to speak to that?
I think, let me just say, I think Edward Doe is mistaken the opposition community in its holistic and totality. Now, there were about 23 political institutions, political parties that contested the 2017 election. And let's be clear about it. The four collaborating parties represent less than 20% of the entire opposition bloc. We have to be clear. Even though in terms of number, they also represent almost 42% of all the vote cast in the 2017 election. So that is something that we have to consider. But in order to contest in a major election, you have to have structure in place. The United Party has structure in place when it contested in the 2017 election. The ANC has structure in place, in fact, structure in major counties and various districts, all right, of the country. The fair candidates in the 73 political subdivisions of the country. So it's the same as the Liberal Party in the ALP. So we cannot question structure at this form. I think what we have not seen and witnessed before in the history of the opposition bloc is a consolidated effort to bring together all of the different ideologies and fundamental disagreements as one and amalgamate themselves as one unit to forge ahead. And this is a logical step. It's a step forward moving towards 2023.
All right, let's bring Edward Doe in there. Mr. Doe.
Yes, I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to rebut certain comments that Mr. Nyanda made. First and foremost, I'm not blaming the opposition for the mistakes of the Weah administration. And I think that the opposition is not doing enough to hold the Weah administration accountable. When you have a democracy and you have an opposition, it must be, a watchdog for the ruling party. It must hold the ruling party to what it says it's going to do. I don't see the opposition, ANC, ALP, and the other organization, doing that at all. So for my colleague to say that the opposition is viable, I think it's a mistake. The opposition is not structured as you said, it's not structured at all. Because when the opposition is structured, we will see the opposition challenging this government toe to toe. And when it comes to protests, I'm not saying that opposition should have protests all the time, as my colleague stated earlier. No, that's not my position. I would like to see the opposition speak on issues. I would like to see the opposition, or challenges government issues. I would like to see the opposition put out their position on certain issues. We don't see that. How can you say you are an opposition, but you don't voice the issue, you don't voice where you stand on issues, you don't challenge the ruling party? How can you? Then we don't have a democracy. A democracy, for it to be vibrant, you must have an opposition that is also vibrant.
Mr. Doe, for example, on the issue of the budget, what you wish to see is an opposition that is. Hold on, Mr. Doe, for example, are you trying to see an opposition bloc that is going all out to critique, like for example, the national budget and telling the Liberian people, this is all we have in the budget, they should not be, they are missed priorities? Is that something like that you're looking for to see in an opposition?
Definitely, they should analyze that budget. They should have a team that can analyze that budget and pinpoint some of the issues in our budget, some of the falsehoods in our budget, whatsoever. But they don't have that. You can be an opposition. You say you intellectual, and then you're not doing the work of an intellectual. I don't see that coming from the opposition. The communists not doing it. Europe not doing it. So how can they differentiate themselves from the Weah who is not educated? You have to have a team of analysts that will look at the budget and say, you know what, there's a holes here that it doesn't add up whatsoever. But they're not doing that. And present their own budget too, in a sense. Let the public look at what they think the budget should be. You see? So present an alternative to the government budget. What do you think it should be? But if you're not doing that, then you're not an opposition. You're not viable at all.
Mr. Yanton.
Sit down, and this is a time now for the opposition of white. It's not election time. In this period, it's time for election for the opposition to hold the administration accountable, and they're not doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Doe. Comrade Yanton, you just listened to Mr. Doe. I think he has a point there because this current administration, I believe, has passed 2 budgets now. We have not heard any serious critique from the opposition as a unified force critiquing the budget. We haven't seen anything like that. What you have to say to that?
Brother Doe is suggesting to us on the platform, as well as the many Liberians listening to this show, that opposition, in order to be a viable alternative, should be able to come up with an alternative budget. We don't run in the opposition an alternative government. The government constituted by the will of the people is the government in charge. So we don't run an alternative government as.
But you are a government in waiting.
Exactly. You are a government waiting. You have a budget.
You don't carve an alternative budget. You don't carve an alternative budget in order to state a point about the projection, the fiscal projection of our national revenue that the government already have passed from the executive to the national legislature. And it is important to strike that point because I think Brother Doe is totally, mistaken. If Brother Doe has seen not enough effort made on the part of the opposition, he should be very honest enough, he should be very credible enough to state what the opposition have done on key national issues and what they have failed to do on key national issues. So he should be chronically outlining to us on the issue of healthcare. The opposition have not had a position on that. On the issue of the.
We're certainly come to healthcare.
We're missing.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Yanton.
Mr. Yanton, your video, we lost
you there, but go ahead.
Let him say, yeah, okay. Let him be able to say to us on the issue of the free education announced by the Weah-led administration, where there was no cost analysis done, all right, that the opposition did not have a position on that. Let him be also able to tell us that the issue of Eton and Igbo math, that the opposition did not have a position on that. Then we can have a conversation, but I don't think his assertion tonight that the opposition have not done enough on the basis of not speaking out when the opposition historically over the last 2 years have been speaking out to press conference, to consolidate the effort of the CPP, to individual members press conferences, whether it's by the Unity Party or the ANC or the ALP. They have been having key positions on national issues, and the records are there. You can check the newspaper. You can check, the different excerpts from the radio stations in Liberia. The records are clear and there. So Mr. Doe should be able to say to us in the public that this is what constitutes not enough in his mind that the opposition has not done, and then we can have the conversation from there.
Mr. Yanton,
I'd like to come in.
Mr. Doe, before you come in, Mr. Yanton, do you have? I want to, before you land your thoughts, do you have a question for Mr. Doe? Or anything?
Yeah, my only question to you is, Mr. Doe, consistent with ruling party, consistent with current ruling party, in his promises made to the Liberian people. What are the promises made by the current ruling party that have not been fulfilled? And in conjunction to that, have the opposition reneged on flagging those, discrepancy in terms of promises made and promises not fulfilled over the last 2 years? Can you speak to that?
Well, that's a broad question, so I'll answer it broadly. If you look at the opposition pro-poor agenda, that's an issue that I think the ruling party pro-poor agenda, that's an issue I think that the opposition should grill the administration on, because they have failed miserably in that area. You mentioned education, you mentioned healthcare. Those are pro-poor issues. Those are social issues. So if they didn't achieve anything there, in the budget on those on education and healthcare, it's insignificant. It's nothing put in that budget for those two things. So what is the opposition doing about that? They're not speaking to those issues, whatsoever, and they're not drilling this government on those issues. You mentioned earlier that the opposition spoke about a bomber fire and metal deal and all those kind of things, whatsoever. But if you look at the budget itself, all those things are part of the budget. So if the opposition is really an opposition, they could take that budget as a Bible and use that budget to grill this administration, because if you look at the economy, the budget is impacting the economy. That budget is impacting the economy. They should grill the administration using that budget. So the opposition is not doing their job. They're not playing the role of an opposition at all. They're not viable to me.
Mr. Doe, when you say the opposition is not speaking to those issues, is not grilling the government on those issues, give me a clear example. What does that mean?
A clear example will be on the issue of healthcare. All right, look at what the budget for healthcare. All right, that's not enough. We don't have hospitals. We don't have the instruments, the technology, and those kind of things. And they're not even thinking about that. They're not even, trying to improve the budget. But if you look at the salaries, the recurring expenses, very big, So that's where the opposition is supposed to be grilling. They're supposed to be grilling those issues right there. The salary issue, the recurring expenses, and then the social issues that they should budget more for, education, healthcare, whatsoever. My colleague mentioned saying that the opposition should not present an alternative budget. They should. As you said, they are the government in waiting. They should present an alternate budget. They should tell us what the budget will look like. What are their priorities when they become president and when they become the ruling party? We should know their priorities in the budget. If they're not telling us that now, how do we know that they are viable? So the opposition is failing us miserably. Likewise, the ruling party. So I do not agree with my colleague that he said that opposition is an opposition that is viable.
Mr. Doe, Yonton said a lot of things that show how the opposition has been making some effort in holding this government feet to the fire. He talked about the Eton and the Igbo mandate. The opposition open their mouth so loudly and they critique it. They sounded alarm that those deeds were bad deeds for the country. The government did not listen. The issue of the hospitals, the healthcare system, the education system, when the president released that policy about free tuition at all public universities, the opposition came out. The healthcare system failing in the country, the opposition came out, and they have been consistent in speaking on the issues. And so I'm still trying to get from you why you think the opposition is not a viable alternative when the opposition has been vocal. I will bring back my question. Is it because of organization, structure that you don't see? But when it comes to the issues of policies, the decisions made by the government, the opposition have gone all out. The opposition has even had to make the government very unpopular on the issue of the war crime code that Yonton talked about and all that. So what are you looking for in an opposition that will represent a viable alternative to you?
Well, it's good that you asked that question. It's good you asked that question because the fact of the matter here is that the opposition being vocal on a couple of issues does not make them to be an opposition. To be a viable opposition, you have to be well structured. You can't just speak on the issue one day or 2 days or a week and then you let it go. No, you have to put out materials, write about those issues that you think will affect the Liberian people. For instance, that loan that we mentioned, the opposition should have gone more in depth. Just saying, no, I oppose it, we oppose it, and this, that's not being an opposition. Explain to us why you think this loan is bad. How would it affect us? The opposition did not go in details, to explain to the Liberian people.
The opposition explained that. They did.
I don't think that what they gave us, the information that was provided was not detailed enough. They should have gone more in detail, whatsoever. Another thing here is that when they came, when the opposition talk about the healthcare whatsoever, they're not giving us details. They're just explaining to us.
What will constitute detail to you, Mr. Doe?
What constitutes detail to me is that, as I said earlier, the opposition should come up with a budget of their own. Say, listen, this is how our priority will be on health issues. This is how we're going to give us a subset as to how you're going to manage and budget for healthcare. Then we know you're serious. Then we know that you're thinking before you get in that office. But they're not saying that. You can just come and say, oh, we don't like the healthcare. We criticize the healthcare.
Are you trying to suggest that? Mr. Doe, are you trying to say, like, for example, on the issue of holding the government accountable on healthcare issue, you want to see one of the opposition leaders showing up to maybe Redemption Hospital and going live and say, hey, this is Redemption Hospital. There are no lights, no gloves. These things have been reported in the press. The opposition.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
What else can they do? If you don't mean that, then what can they do? Because they have spoken on these things.
Well, what I'm saying that you mentioned that earlier is structure. Structure means that you present yourself, your budget, the priorities, how you're going to budget, for healthcare. What would be the subset for budgeting healthcare? How you going to pay doctors? How you going to bring in, doctors in the country, things of that nature? How you going to revitalize the healthcare system and all those kind of things? Show us a blueprint. The Weah administration doesn't have a blueprint. That tells me that if you show us a blueprint, that tells me that you are structured, that you are well organized, that you are thinking ahead, that you have the people in your mind. But we don't have no blueprint. How can I say you're viable? The same thing that happened to Weah. The administration, they came in without a blueprint. They said they were talking about pro. Up to now, we don't see a viable blueprint. So the point here is that the opposition said they're the intellectuals. Why they're not putting things on paper to show the Liberian people what is the priorities in the budget? They should have a budget for the.
Before we go back to Yonton, Mr. Doe.
Mr. Doe, let me just come in.
Yonton, hold on. Yonton, hold on. Before we go back to Yonton, Mr. Doe, in politics, sometimes political success is mentioned by the political victories one win. I said sometime. And the opposition that you are claiming to not be a viable alternative has won a senatorial seat in CDC stronghold. And not only did they win it, they won it with the highest number of votes ever. That the opposition won this seat, winning more votes than even Weah was able to obtain when he won the Senate seat. Don't you see that as a sign of an opposition that is viable?
Well, I wouldn't say that is a sign that the opposition is viable, because I think that's an isolated incident.
Okay.
Isolated election, whatsoever. The people of Montserrat County, definitely wanted somebody of that nature, like Darius DeLeon, who speaks on the issue most of the time. He has his own podcast, whatsoever. So they believe that this is some of the things I was just alluding to, that the opposition should be consistent in grilling this government, whatsoever. But they are not, So Darren Dillon was able to convince the resident of Montserrat County that he's a better person than his challenger. And that's how he won in huge numbers. So I don't think that represents that the opposition is viable. That is just an isolated incident.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yonton, you listen to Mr. Doe.
Yeah.
You want to come in?
Sure. So Brother Doe is trying to shoot for the moon without knowing where exactly the satellite should be positioned. It is important to note that the budget is a reflection of our country's performance. The budget is a law. Opposition political parties are not clothed with the authority of making laws. When the budget is prepared, it's sent to the national legislature, and that is passed by the national legislature, the two houses, which becomes a law. The performance of the budget is what opposition is clothed to talk about. And in the case of Liberia, we have concluded one fiscal budget, one fiscal year on Weah, with the presentation of budget performances over that year in terms of how much was allocated for administrative costs and operation costs for the running of government, or in terms of how much was allocated indeed for public expenditure in terms of the different projects and programs that run across. So if you talk about the healthcare and the hospitals, that can be factored into that. The opposition at the inception of this budget, the draft budget, made a position, had a clear position, that we have not even seen the budget performance for the previous fiscal year. And now you're submitting a draft budget, which will reflect the government, in terms of revenue and projection for the next year. So I think Mr. Doe has either not been listening or he has refused to listen. But the bottom line here is that the opposition, in terms of viability, in terms of alternative, cannot be measured only by national budget and what it says to it. The opposition cannot create its own budget. What the opposition can do is to speak to core issues that affect the lives of the people within the national budget in terms of government public expenditure and programmings that affect the lives of our people. One of such has to do with education. The president launched in July of 2018. He launched a free school program, like for university and other tertiary institutions, free school, without understanding the ramification of that policy. That for every program that is being created as a policy program on a government, there should be a corresponding cost analysis to it. Today, we had teachers, most recently we had students on the rampage protesting because teachers have not been paid. It's as the result of the bad policy taken by Weah for free school. Opposition had a position on that. Opposition has had position on the issue of war and economic crimes court. We continuously said that we want the establishment of war and economic crimes court so that we, as a people, victims of the Liberian Civil War, as well as those of our compatriots who lost their lives, who are still waiting in the grave so that justice is served, can have a final closure to our dark past. We've had a position on that. Opposition have had position on when the government attempted to go to Tapeta Hospital in Lima County and borrow machine to bring it to Monrovia, knowing that that's the only referral hospital in the region. So what is what Brother Doe is talking about? Either he has not been listening or he has refused completely to listen. But the point of the matter is that structure has not been the fundamental issue of the opposition community. I would agree that we have challenges. Challenges further along the line.
Let me throw this in. Maybe
I got a question for
Edward.
I got a question for my colleague there.
Hold on, Mr. Doe. Yantan, maybe Edward Doe can see why an opposition of this nature will be silent on things like the First Lady being allotted $1.5 million. That the opposition, the job made noise and that's it. Maybe that is not satisfying to Edward Doe, that you just talk about it, that the national government allotted $1.5 million to the First Lady. And this woman, whether or not she's audited or not, they just sit there. Why are they not calling for order? Maybe that's something that he's looking to see in an opposition that is positioning itself as being viable or an alternative.
Well, let me say, maybe we can take cue from Brother Doe in terms of how the volume of the opposition should be in terms of how they speak. All right. But if you have a position on a particular issue to press conference, you complain in the introductory part of your statement, Brother Doe, that the opposition have only limited themselves to protest. So there are different levels of advocacy, political advocacy. So you take an issue, you address an issue, you have a press conference, you continuously re-sign that press conference by making follow-up presentations and appearances on radio stations and what have you. You make recommendations to government, and the opposition have done that. The president called all opposition political parties to a roundtable discussion right at the Royal Grand Hotel. Opposition appeared. Most of them attended, with the exception of Alexander Cummings, and it was widespread why Alexander Cummings did not go. We also saw the likes of Dr.nya who walked out of that meeting. But the opposition, again, presented some of the recommendations that they think can move the economy forward. The question of the economy cannot be overlooked because it affects the daily lives of our people. Today, as we speak, more than half of the population of our country lives below $1 a day. It is strangulating to our people. The inflation rate is high. The interest rate is high. This is concerning to all of us, whether you are opposition or not. It's concerning to all Liberians. And this is why we see the multiplicity and the proliferation of live videos all across here in the diaspora, because people want their voices to be heard alongside the opposition. So the opposition, I think in my mind, have been speaking. And if the opposition in terms of viability is greater, but whether they've been speaking or not, then Mr. Doe needs to listen a little more. I know that we have challenges within the opposition, but that is tied to unity. Unity in the sense that.
Thank you.
Let me
Mr.
come in,
Yonton,
please.
let
I got
me
a question. I got a question for my colleague there, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Doe.
Yes. First and foremost, let me premise my question with this. Set it up with this. Mr. Nyan, I can say the name well.
Yonton.
Yeah. Listen, I've been listening, and if you have followed my writings or read some of my writings, I write a lot. So I am well versed with what the opposition has been doing, but you made a comment saying that the opposition have been, questioning the budget, and they can't, produce their own budget because they're not in the ruling party. And I'm taking back on that, because the fact of the matter is that how can the opposition then be a viable opposition if they don't have their own budget policy? They should have their own budget policy to be able to speak on budget issues. And to do that, it means that they have to compile or put together a budget of their own, that will reflect their own priorities, where they want to take the country when they become the ruling party, you see. So for you just to ignore the fact that the opposition should not have a budget of its own, to me, is falsehood. Then it means also that the opposition is not structured and is not doing the work of an opposition, because budget policy is very important, okay? And that's why we're in this mess, because the opposition is not challenging this government on its budget policy and priorities. If the opposition was challenging this government on its budget policy and priorities, the economy wouldn't have gone this bad, okay? Or the ruling party would have, worked hard to fix it.
How would that have happened, Mr. Doe, that if the opposition have been going toe-to-toe with the government on budget issue, then we would not have this kind of mess? I mean, what is the guarantee?
The guarantee, well, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but it would raise a conversation around the budget on issues, the spending plan, like how much money they're putting into healthcare, how much money they're putting into education. That will raise a conversation, a national conversation on that. The opposition is there to raise this kind of conversation. And
if the conversation is raised and the government does not add on recommendations, in the case of the opposition and the COP gave recommendation, the government is here to add. Who do you hold responsible?
No. Given a recommendation,
I know you
answer your question about recommendation. Given a recommendation, to me, is just a sideline issue. The opposition have to be consistent. Even if you give a recommendation, it doesn't mean you should stop speaking on that. It doesn't mean that. You should continue speak on that. Even if they don't take your recommendation whatsoever, you continue to speak on that. If they take a recommendation, or if they take portion of the recommendation, then you should still speak on that, because there are certain areas that they need to improve on. It does not mean that you should be silent on that.
Thank you.
I think
it's a conversation. They need to raise a conversation on the budget. And we don't have, Liberia, we don't have a conversation on the budget. We have never have a national conversation on the budget.
Thank you. This is focused on Liberia. We are discussing the opposition bloc. Does the opposition represent a credible and a viable alternative to the current administration? If you want to join the conversation, call 712-770-8002, the code 229545. We have a caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you calling from. Okay. So I think before I bring in the caller, I think we need to go back to defining who an opposition is or what an opposition needs to be doing. From what I'm hearing, Mr. Doe is talking about the opposition presenting its own plan. Mr. Yonton is talking about the opposition speaking out. So, Mr. Yonton, let me start with you. In your view, what should an opposition be doing? That's the question I need the both of you to answer before I bring in my the caller on the line.
Thank you, Mr. Jack.
Yeah.
I believe that the critical role of the opposition in the context of Liberia, young and emerging democracy, is to properly scrutinize the actions and inaction, as well as policy prescription of the government, the current ruling party. The opposition should work towards a unified nation because from all indication, they are a government in succession. They are the government in waiting. So they should work towards key issues that unify the country in terms of reconciliation and peace. And that's why when we saw that this government came up with the pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development, one of the pillars had a continuous consolidation of our peace and security. It was widely welcomed across the opposition community. No one wants to see Liberia revert into war and chaos. And I think the opposition, in many of the press conferences, in many of the issues that they stood up to challenge the feet of this government on, they always maintained that they will remain peaceful, whether it was protests or whether it was their support towards a protest.
Thank
They
you.
always said that they will remain peaceful. So the role of the opposition is clearly defined within that scope, as well as in other areas of national concern.
Thank you, Mr. Doe. Briefly.
Yeah, briefly, I've stated it earlier. The role of the opposition in a democracy is basically to be a watchdog, hold the current administration accountable for what they're doing, whatsoever. But in that regard, too, the opposition should be prepared themselves, because they are the government in waiting, and in so doing, they need to also present to us, the public, their position, their policy, and as they criticize this government, or they hold the government accountable. And the opposition, in my, what I've observed, is not doing none of those things. They are not viable to me at all. They're not playing the role of an opposition as a democratic, society should be.
Thank you. Let me bring on my caller. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Hello, Dennis. This is Masa Dobu. I'm calling from the beautiful state of Delaware.
Welcome, Masa. Your question or comment?
Well, I just wanted to add up to what Mr. Doe stated earlier regarding the role of the opposition. To be honest with you, I agree with everything that Mr. Doe has stated over there, and I hope that my good friend and brother, Laramie, will kind of take down notes and be able to communicate that to his opposition group, because there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of points that he stated, and I think that the opposition should use those talking points and be able to really relate to the Liberian people and be able to educate those who don't even support them. Because as an opposition, like Mr. Doe said, you are the blessed government in waiting. And so we need to be engaged. We need to be proactive. We need to be able to communicate those issues that matter. And there are a lot of things that this government is involved into that is not even right, even to their own people who voted for them. And you, as an opposition, we expect you to take on those issues. You are the opposition now. The people who are in power, you don't expect them to come out and be criticizing their government. But we expect you, as an opposition, to come out and be really focus your attention on those issues and educate people on the way forward. But so far, and just to go back to the time that CDC was in opposition, if this opposition would learn a lesson, they should learn a lesson that indeed when CDC was in opposition for 12 years, all CDC was doing was that they were focused on protest, and not really taking on Ellen on those issues that she was missing, those policy issues. They were not presenting those facts. Because when they were presenting those facts, trust me, CDC was never going to have a problem with the problem that they have right now. But because they were just they were just focused on protest, which is the same that we see this opposition now doing. Everything about this opposition is about protest. Everything about it is about protest. No, protest is not all to it. We want you to pick up those issues and be able to present an alternative way forward. And we want you to engage the public, both in person and as well, let's say face to face as well as through the media. But this opposition is not involved into that. They are so focused on protesting. They are so focused on spreading the negative image of our country and deterring investors from coming into the country. That's not the role of an opposition. An opposition should be able to take on those policy issues that are affecting our people, that are affecting the day-to-day living condition of our people. And so I hope that my good friend Laramie will really be able to take down notes for Elon Doe and be able to communicate that to his base on the role of an opposition. You are the next government in waiting. If this government fails, the people are looking up to enlighten you. So what are you coming in with? Are you going to come in and then tell the Liberian people that please give us 90 days for us to give you our agenda on how we're going to run the country? No, we want you to come in prepared. And you can only be prepared now.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question for the caller, Daniel, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I wanted Laramie to respond to that. The caller, please hold on. After Laramie respond.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Yonton.
Lassa, thank you for participating on the show. I think if you follow the show, Brother Doe is arguing that the opposition should be an alternative government. Yes, indeed, the opposition is the next government in waiting. But the opposition cannot be a part of the government to the government that is already constituted by the will of the people. I will not be suffering for any illusion to argue that there are not challenges within the opposition community today. But the ones he point to are not the ones that, based on his level of inability to listen, or he's not been listening at all. The opposition has already been engaged. Now, if you say the opposition is not presenting a viable alternative, a viable program, a platform, that only happens within the election period. In 2017, the unit.
No, it does. I'm gonna come in. It does not happen with the election period.
I allow you to speak. I didn't interrupt. In 2017, the Unity Party presented their platform based on reconstruction and rural rehabilitation. Cummings ran on the platform of building a stronger economy, a revitalized economy. The ALP and Ben and I ran on agriculture. If you can take note and consider, they ran on agriculture. The Labour Party ran on the 4 R's: reconciliation, reconstruction, and all of that. So there has been a conservative program agenda spread across this party. What we would like to see is a cohesive consolidation of all of the different platforms that were already presented to the Liberian people. So if you guys are arguing that the opposition have not presented anything, then you guys are just not earnest to the Liberian people and earnest to the discussion. But the opposition has been very engaged, consistent with those platforms that they provided the Liberian people that was refused by the Liberian people in 2017. And they have maintained this position.
But that was true. That was true. So Dennis, I have to come in because I have to leave. The opposition presented a platform during the campaign time, and the Liberian people did not buy their platform. The Liberian people bought the platform of CDC. So now it's the role of the opposition to ensure that what the government that was in waiting presented to the Liberian people, to ensure that those things that are presented to the Liberian people to ensure that these things are implemented. And that's where your role comes in. So you cannot tell me that
So let me ask you,
because
how can the opposition ensure
your
that we are?
platform doing campaign
Can I
time.
ask you a question,
Hold
Massa?
on, let her finish.
No, listen, you cannot tell me because you presented your platform during the election time and the people rejected you, so that your role ends right there. Then why
No,
do you
that's not what I
want the people
said.
to come in again?
Can I
So
comment, please?
we are only
Massa raised an important point, a good point. Can I comment, please?
Hold on. We got other callers on the line. Master, please conclude.
For me personally, Laramie, I'm only trying. I'm one person. I would tell anybody. I don't care how I support you, but when I see something is not right, I'm going to speak out against it. I'm not in the role of an opposition. You understand? But we are only trying to use this platform to be able to give you some talking points and be able to give you some suggestions that you guys can base your argument on. We can always have protests. Protest is not your role. Your role should be able to engage the people, hold the people accountable for their work. There are a lot of things that are going on in the government that needs to be put stop to. And we are relying on you, the opposition, to come in as a professional person.
I have a question for you, Massa.
Can I comment, please?
Please allow me to ask a question.
Let me let Massa go.
Can I comment, please?
Allow her go.
Hold on. Let me let Massa go. We have other callers on the line. Thank you, Massa.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis.
Bye. Okay, let me go back to you, Mr. Yonto. Are you saying that the opposition presented a platform 2017, and so that platform is suspended until another round of election? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's not what I said. And I think the position taken by both Massa and Brother Doe is broadly misconstrued. It's misconstrued in the effect of the proper role of the opposition. We must be very clear. The opposition has been doing some of the things that they said the opposition should be doing. And that's not my argument. My argument is that while there are challenges, but what you point out to constitute that the opposition is not structural, is not a viable alternative, it's not enough. Massa alluded to the fact that the opposition is not doing well. The opposition should be able to ensure, and I quote unquote the word ensure, that Weah does this or Weah does that. How can the opposition ensure that Weah stop riding a private jet while JFK goes with our life? How can the opposition ensure? Massa should be able to tell us. It should not be a broader context of an idea. Narrow it down to specifics and structural plan as well as recommendation. That's how we take note. But you cannot say the opposition should ensure that we are follow through his campaign promises. How can we do that, Massa? Be able to tell us, along with Mr. Doe, that the opposition should do X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3.
Can I comment, please? I've been silent for a long time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Doe.
Yes. I gotta laugh about this, really, because the brother, is saying that he's trying to justify the silence of the opposition during the periods when elections are not held. The opposition should not do anything. They should be dogman, whatsoever. The platform they presented during the election time should be suspended. They should not speak on it at all till another election. That's a bad way to present yourself as a political party or as a political opposition. I think the brother here does not understand really what the role of a political opposition is. It is not during election season when you become a political opposition.
Oh, no, I don't.
You are a political opposition year round because you are organized. You are a political party. You should be able to speak on issues. You should be able to present your policy, even if it was rejected during an election period. Continue to present that policy, or perhaps improve on it. Enhance the policy. Maybe there are certain things that the people didn't like, and you go back to the drawing book and improve on that.
Mr. Doe, maybe the opposition doesn't want to be seen as running campaign already.
No,
it's not running campaign. It's not running campaign. You got to have talking points. You have to have a talking points as to what your party is about. as you criticize the ruling party, you have to also have a talking point, and the opposition does not have it. You see, the opposition, the brother spoke about, challenges. So you keep saying challenges, but can you please, let me ask you this question. Can you please list 1 or 2 challenges of the opposition?
Yanton, go for it. 1 or 2 challenges.
Mr. Doe, I will respond to the challenges that the current configuration of the opposition through the CPP has. But let me clarify the misconception on the basis of my next session. I did not say that the opposition should remain silent in between elections, because I'm a strong believer of the fact that real democratic change is not just on election day. It happens in between elections. And the opposition, well versed with that. All of the opposition collaborating parties are well versed with that. That's why when the question about unity was asked among key political parties that performed in the last election, they came together. They listened to the will of the people. They could have waited up to election day or the morning of election in 2023 to come together. But way before 2023, they saw the need to collaborate and build a cohesive force. So you cannot say the opposition has been dormant in between election, when in the last 2 years, or only the last 2 years, we have seen active, consolidated step, vehement step by the opposition to consolidate itself. All right. The point I'm saying when I say the opposition have challenges, we see that there is still, even in the midst of the formal agreement, to forge a common front and unite all of the 4 collaborating parties, we still see some level of disunity. All right, on the part of supporters of the opposition bloc, the collaborating parties. You find on one hand on social media, the ANC attacking the Unity Party, and on the other hand, the Unity Party supporters attacking the ANC. That is not called for, but that's disunity. But that doesn't negate the fact that there is structure in place. Benana Yura will be turning over as the organizing chairman of the CPP come November. A new leader of the CPP will emerge. They will consolidate the very agreement that brought the CPP to being. So there has been consistent step towards unifying the opposition bloc, towards ensuring that the proper role of the opposition is being seen by people like you, who have not been able to substantiate some of the lapses of the opposition in terms of clear logical steps, as opposed to giving a blanket misconstrued assertion on the opposition. And this is where we come in. We can take note from you, Mr. Doe and Marcia, if you say that the opposition have not been able to speak on day one on this issue or that issue, and list those issues that the opposition has spoken on and give them credit on issues that they have not spoken on. And then we can have a conversation around that. But the role of the opposition is not protest. This opposition is far mature than the opposition that we saw on the Mount Salif, and you can attest to that.
Thank you,
That's
Mr. Yonton.
Alexander Cummings, just to learn quickly, Alexander Cummings in one of his many radio presentations, he said that this is a responsible opposition going against an irresponsible government. And that is clear. That is very clear. That our role as opposition would not be to protest every day, but we will make policy prescription, we will make policy statement on issues that affect the daily lives of our people.
Okay, let me bring in a caller. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Yes, sir. This is Jawinken calling from North Dakota.
Jawinken, your last name, please.
This is Jawinken Weah calling from North Dakota.
Jawinken, welcome to Focus. That's the boss for Imo. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comments?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I was just listening today. I have 1 or 2 things to say about what is going on in Liberia regarding opposition and the ruling party. I listened to both sides, and I think that the issue that is about is that I wanted to make one thing I wanted to say is that protest is part of the Constitution. So I don't think it is right for the government to say the opposition is only is using protest as it may, because protest is part of the ways of running the government. On the other hand, there is, from my own observation, there is no defined rule. Or the problem I have with opposition and government in Liberia is that the opposition is not coming out strongly to say what will they do differently, what is wrong. So which require like coming out directly. Look, this is what we will do. This is what the government do that is wrong. At the same time, the government also it was very popular. It has the mandate. A Liberian to go vote for this government to right the wrong. But people, the government keep giving excuses that the government was bad, this government was bad. That is the reason why people elected them. Up to now, this government has not put in place a timeline with respect to what they're going to do in the period of time. For example, in 6 months' time, this is going to happen. They keep giving excuses, which is not good for the Liberian people. They are in charge of the resources of Liberia. The opposition is not in charge of resources. Liberia is different. African government, they are different. For example, beer factory cannot say they are declaring support for the opposition to give them resources. The government is going to track it down or crack it down. So it is imbalanced when it comes to making comparison as to what government can do and what opposition can do. But the only problem I have with opposition is that they are not saying what is wrong with the country and what they are going to do differently. The same way when Weah was running, he didn't say what was wrong and what you are going to do differently. There is no timeline. So it's so Liberia need to really figure out as to how to move this Congress forward.
Mr. Yonton,
That's
our caller
my
is
point.
saying, thank you, Mr. Weah. Our caller is saying
Okay.
the opposition is not saying what they're going to do differently. What's your response?
I agree with the caller partly that the opposition is not coming up strongly. It did not negate the fact that the opposition is not coming up at all, but they are not coming up strongly. And this is a point that we can take, as opposition to those at the level of the CPP. The point I'm trying to make is that, Mr. Jah, that we cannot say that the opposition under the 2 years of Weah administration has been dormant. Therefore, they present themselves not as a viable alternative towards 2023. And my brother Doe is arguing that the opposition is not a viable alternative because they lack structure and they have been dormant and they have not been engaged in ensuring that the promises made by this government is actually implemented and implemented to the letter. That is not a proper role of the opposition, to ensure that campaign promises made by another party that contested an election that you contested in is met. That is not our role. And if you argue that we should ensure that we are, ensure that you campaign promise, let us know how we can do it. All right, let us know how we can ensure that we can be very sensitive to the plight of the Liberian people. In Lima County,
let me stop you.
Redemption Hospital is at the verge of closing.
Mr. Yonton,
where people,
let me stop you there. Let's take, for instance, the economy. Right now, the economy is in a bad state. What is the opposition plan to grow the economy when they take power tomorrow? Why is there was a student protest, teachers are not paid. What is the opposition plan to make sure that our school system is no longer in mess, as President Sully described it, or students are not demonstrating? What is the plan of the opposition to make sure that we are not importing pepper from Guinea, that we are able to grow what we eat and eat what we grow? What's the plan? I think that's what people are looking for.
Well, I think that will have to be communicated more and more by the opposition community, but the plan has been there. In one of the many radio appearances, it was quite recently on 50-50, right? When one of the political leaders of the four collaborating parties appeared, he acknowledged the fact that part of the problem that we have is not inherited. It's not a direct contribution or attribution to the Weah-led administration. We have an input-driven economy, okay? We have an economy based on the extractive industry, and that's the known fact. Until we start to have value added to the resources, the natural resources that we have, and invite companies that are able to do at home small scale manufacturing. All right, that's one of the ways that we can be able to ensure that we boom the economy, but at the same time create jobs. So
Is that what the opposition is
Can I come in, please?
Outlined to the
Mr. Dennis, can I
Liberian
come in,
people.
please?
They have been said during campaigns. They have been said after campaigns. They have been said on different radio stations. Individual political leaders have always not negated the fight that they can sell their plans to the Liberian people. And it was Alexander Kumi that just sold his plan about building a stronger economy. And the way to do that, we cannot have excess of employees on the payroll, like we saw with the current ruling party when it took over. They increased the number of the payroll size from what it was to an astronomical number. At the end of the day, they do not have the kind of resources that they are generating to ensure that they pay those people. So what we say that the public sector cannot be the only means for employment for our people. Let's look to the private sector. Let's expand the private sector. Let's encourage investment in the country and it show value added to the natural resources that we have. Because in that way, we will not be shipping jobs.
Mr. We have a caller on the line, but before the caller, let Mr. Doe please come in.
Yeah, let me come in quickly. The brother, sorry to say this, but I don't think you understand what it means to have a spending plan. You know, what it means that an opposition should have a spending plan. You know, you cannot grow the economy with all that jargon you're speaking about adding value to the resources and all that stuff without a spending plan. You know, that's hearsay. Sorry to say, but I don't think, you can grow an economy without a budget plan. A budget plan, a spending plan is a footprint, a blueprint that tells you how you're going to collect your revenue, how you're going to spend it, and how you're going to grow the economy. So when you say that the opposition should not prepare a budget or should not present a budget to the public as to their spending plan, as to their priorities, then you're telling us saying that this opposition is not viable. You're telling us that. Simply put, that's what you're saying. They're not viable because I cannot, embrace a political party or an opposition that has no spending plan. How are you going to collect our revenue and not telling me, how are you going to spend it? No, I want to see what your priorities are. Whether your priorities on, revitalizing the healthcare, education. I want to see that.
Mr. Doe.
Mr. Doe. So if you're not telling me that,
Mr. Doe,
you're not viable.
Thank you.
Mr. Doe, again, you are shooting.
Hold on,
Hold on, Mr. Yontu. I want to bring a caller on. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Oh, good evening, Mr. Jad. They put Arizona RC from Minnesota this evening.
Alex, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Yes, I will make a comment and ask my brother, Darama Nyamptons, one or two questions. Okay. I noticed that, my brother is struggling to define the role of the opposition. When you talk about, vibrant, opposition that, is able to be a watchdog, to the ruling party.
Exactly.
But the current opposition is now a watchdog to CDP. CDP is one party, but, the government have been making, a lot of errors, but we expect, the opposition to speak out or say things that, to keep the government on track. But they are not doing it. The only thing that we see for them to do is to organize a protest. Yarama Johnson there, in recent times, the COP make a statement. They say that on the 30th of December, they want for Judge Weah to step down. He wrote on a page, he condemned it. So why is it that the opposition are not condemning such a statement coming from COP and calling them vibrant opposition? And you alluded to that the opposition has challenges. That tells me that the opposition are not organized. It also tells me that the opposition are not prepared from now to 2023. If you tell me that the opposition has challenges, So it tells me that from now to 2023, the opposition are not prepared. They are not prepared because right now, the only thing they're doing.
Just finish your thought, then we can. Then Mr. Yonton can respond.
Yeah. My question to Yonton is what Yonton, looking at the current opposition and statements coming from key opposition and the political leader within the CPC. Do you think the opposition will win the 2023 election? If you listen to Benena Uri's statement, saying that what you now see Edizana coming to be the next president, and Mr. Kumi are saying you now see Mr. Uri to be the next president. Are you telling all that the opposition are prepared to take state power in 2023?
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Mr. Tuta. Mr. Yonton.
All right.
Hello, are you guys hearing me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Adesanya. Let me state my position again clearly. That from the beginning of the show, I said in my opening statement that the opposition can be and could be a viable alternative in the 2023 election. And the reason is simple. Now, I acknowledge that we have a challenge, and one of the challenges that we have is the issue of unity that should exist across the length and breadth of all of the collaborating parties. We should also be looking towards including other opposition political institutions and political parties that also contested the last election into this, umbrella framework of the coalition for political parties, opposition political parties, is something that the opposition needs to do. And again, I cannot speak to the extent to which that Uri can go over Cummins or Cummins go over Uri. And that's the bedrock, of the very reason why the opposition political parties came to be, to unite themselves. So they will devise means through which that can happen, moving towards 2023. Now, if we can see for the next year that the opposition can be able to control their supporters, like in the case that I mentioned, the ANC supporters making attacks on the Unity Party supporters, Unity Party giving counterattacks on the ANC, but that all of that is not called for. So we need a total sense of civility within the opposition. But also, given the challenges that the opposition have, that does not negate the fact that the opposition have not been given an active and critical role, to holding the government feet to the fire. Which umbrella on the other side of the aisle is suggesting that the opposition has been dormant, the opposition has no plan. I don't know which part of the world that will exist that the opposition political party before becoming CPP have political plan, have political agenda to present that into the Liberian people. But you come to us and say that they have no plan. Well, I mean, I still fathom, it's unfathomable. I still trying to understand how does that exist, in the current state of my being, that the opposition has no plan. That absolutely Cummins have presented no plan to the Liberian people. He wanted to be president. Absolutely, Benda, you have presented no plan to the Liberian. That's not the case. I think what both the Cummins and the Liberty Party and the ALP needs to do is to further communicate clearly and articulate their views and programs to the Liberian people. But there exists a plan.
Mr.
The
Yonton.
Liberty Party has the
Let me come in, please. Let me ask Mr. Yanta one question. Hold on, Mr. Jar, Dennis. Let me ask Mr. Yanta one question, please.
You will ask your question. I just want to welcome our guest, or not our guest, our West African correspondent, Mr. Edward Amara. Mr. Amara, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Sorry, I just lost light here. Good evening and good morning from Sierra Leone. Just lost light.
All right, not a problem. We'll come back to you to give us the news rundown. Mr. Do, go ahead with your question to Mr. Yonton.
Yes. The brother said that they have a plan. Let me ask you one question. Can you please tell us, or tell the listening audience, what's the opposition spending policy? In one simple sentence.
What is the opposition what?
Spending policy.
Spending.
Policy. Spending plan policy. Budget policy.
To spend money, spending.
spending the budget policy. The budget policy is a budget plan is a spending plan.
Well, you may want to stick on the budget issue. It is not the role of the opposition to prepare budget. It is never the role of the opposition. The budget is a law. The opposition can speak to the budget when it is passed. The opposition can speak to the budget.
Are you suggesting the opposition don't have a budget policy of their own?
It's like you're shooting for the moon and don't know which one
I
of the planet that
I can
you're
speak
gonna
to
land
something
on.
if they don't have a policy of their own.
I think you are missing the opposition in the case.
But
the opposition will have to prepare budget. All around the world, governments prepare budget. Budget is a projection of the performance of a country, given a particular fiscal year. You have to understand this. That's not the role of the opposition. That will never be the role of the opposition in the next 100 years. I'm not going to require you as an opposition member to prepare budget. No, that's not our role. We speak to issues relative to what the budget projects that affects the daily life of our people. And if you argue that the opposition have not been speaking on the issue of health, ask the workers, the health workers that protested. What was the role of the opposition? What was the position on them? What was the position of the opposition when the government attempted to borrow the scanning machine from Tabata Hospital? Like, you guys have been very, very unfair to the opposition bloc. The opposition.
My brother. How can
Mr. Doe, hold on. Mr. Doe, hold on.
Mr.
Doe, hold on.
Okay.
Was that the opposition political parties cannot unite? That across these political lines, across these political institutions, there was a deep sense of equitizing. There was a deep sense of I, me, and myself. Those political leaders came together and formed a collaborating party. Everything is not made piecemeal. Everything is not 100%. There still lies within the code of the collaborating party the issue.
Thank you, Yanton.
And the issue of cohesiveness.
I got a follow-up question. I got a quick follow-up question for the brother.
In the 2017 election, and they are now trying to see how they can work together. So we need to give them a space. We need to understand that projecting towards 2020, we want to tell them that.
Are you suggesting that you people don't have a budget ideology?
Entirely. If
the opposition doesn't have a budget ideology, that's scary.
Then you have to
Yanton, thank you.
Or go back to some of the records that are already there because they have been.
Yanton, you made your point. Let me fit there. Yanton, you made your point. Let me come to Mr. Doe. Dennis, Mr. Doe.
Yes.
You live in the United States. I'm very sure you follow politics. Your emphasis on this conversation all along now is that the opposition should present an alternative budget as a way of communicating better how this government is governing. And you are suggesting that that's the best way they can make the case in terms of being an alternative. My question to you, in the United States, I've been here for some time now. I have not heard a budget from the opposition. When the Democrats were in power, the Republicans did not come up with a budget to say, hey, there will be our budget. And this budget will do better. All they did all along when they were in opposition, I'm talking about the Republican, was to critique the Democratic budget. And that's what the Democratic Party is doing. I have not seen a budget from the Democratic Party as an alternative budget. And you are trying to suggest to us that in order for this current opposition to be seen as an alternative, there should be a budget plan that will be different from the current government, how they will do it differently.
Good question.
We got calls on the line.
If you visit, if you have visited
that program, in this program, they should be telling us how.
Hold on. Let's go, Mr. Doe.
Yeah. If you have visited the Democratic website when they were in the opposition, you will see the budget plan there, the spending plan there. They always have a budget. You always have the opposition will have a budget ideology. Okay. What my brother is saying that the opposition in Liberia doesn't have a budget ideology at all.
That's not what I said, Mr. Doe.
That's what you said. You said you don't have to prepare a budget. You got to prepare something to be on your website. You can direct people to it. They can see what you have there, whether it makes sense. They themselves can critique it too, whatsoever. In this country, that's what they do. Okay. They put their budget against the ruling party budget.
How those programs will be funded. That's what they do. They
All
talk
right,
about,
gentlemen, let's leave it there. We
when they
have a
talk
call
about
on the line. Gentlemen, let's leave it there. We have a
Okay.
call on the line.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Jal, let's go to the phone line.
All right. Let me. We have Mr. Jokai on the line here. We couldn't get through the line. Jokai, your question or first introduce yourself, and let's listen to your question or comment.
Thank you very much, Dennis. My name is Sophia Jokai. I'm calling on the show from Danbury, Connecticut. And like I said in my comment, under your post, that the conversation is a very good one. I'm attracted to it. For one reason, you use a particular word.
Joe, turn your monitor on, off. Joe, please turn your monitor off.
Speak on it, so I will tweak it a little bit to say viability. So the entire discussion is centered around that word viability, the viability of the opposition. This is what I gather from the two thesis statements. Eric defines the opposition, the current opposition, based on the scope of the CPP.
Hold on, Jokai. We're getting a feedback from you. Can you turn the volume of your?
No, I don't have anything on.
Okay, go ahead.
As a matter of fact, yeah. I'm in a secluded place. I don't have anything on. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Edward defined the CPP in terms of the current opposition. And Yonton is looking at it beyond the scope of the CPP. And at the same time, looking at what members of the CPP are doing, either
Conference muted.
or as individual constituent political parties of the CPP. All the same, this is the meat of it all, in my opinion, viability. And if we look at the word viability, it has to do with organization. It has to do with structure. It has to do with efficiency. It has to do with effectiveness and endurance. So if you ask me as to whether or not the current opposition is viable, and if I should take Edward's definition into account, because right now the opposition can be gauged based on the CPP arrangement, I will say no. The opposition is not viable. And I will not be tying it only to the current opposition. Even when the CDC was in opposition, it was not viable. The opposition was not viable. What really happened for the CDC to have won the election was a peculiar factor, was a unique factor. It was not on the basis of whatever platform the CDC presented to the Liberian people. It was on the basis of the popularity of the candidate of the CDC that led to the CDC winning the election. It was not basically on policy issue. It was not basically on platform issue that they will have led or governed differently from the Unity Party. Beyond the CDC, the opposition in Liberia has never been viable.
Okay.
It has never been a structural arrangement based on clearly defined philosophy or ideology that binds the people together to fight to win, consistent with the ideals of our defense democracy. What is happening currently with the opposition is that they have made attempts to organize themselves consistent with viability, consistent with an organized structural system and principles. That's what they have tried to do. It is a work in progress.
Yeah.
But in terms of measuring its viability, no, it is not.
Thank you.
Because individual political parties are pursuing their own individual party interests, not from a concerted approach. Worst of it all, you have a dictator in power now. What we have is autocracy. In all form is autocracy. And to take down this autocratic form of government, you will have to have a concerted effort. There is no individual approach that will take down the Weah administration.
Thank
For
you.
the opposition
Mr.
to be
Joker,
viable,
Mr. Joker, just conclude.
to adapt a concerted approach. So the structure to bring about effectiveness and efficiency in the opposition has not been demonstrated on the part of the CPP. It has not been demonstrated.
Thank
So
you.
it doesn't deserve the trust and confidence of the Liberian people. That's why there is still acrimony, there is still apprehension about going towards 2023 if the president should continue to be president.
Thank you, Mr. Joker.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, I got one more caller on the line, and then we go to our West African correspondent.
Conference unmuted.
Caller, your name and where you calling from?
Yeah. Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. My name is Jerome Cohn. I am calling from North Dakota.
Jerome, welcome to
Yeah. Hello.
You can lower the volume of your phone there.
You right. You got that right. I hold on 1 second. Yeah.
Oh,
I just wanted to agree with the other callers who talk about the question of viability of the opposition political parties in Liberia. And I do agree with Mr. Doe 100% on that. And the last caller that just left the line, I also want to agree with him. There was collaborating political parties or coalition political parties. In my own judgment, it's only with the press, the national press of Liberia. These wars are not wars that the opposition political parties have all agreed on that we're going to work under one umbrella. You will see where some of them claim indispensability, like the ANC leader. Recently, there was a meeting of political parties in Liberia, which he did not attend. A few days later, the UNE come back and want to clarify why he did not attend that meeting. Just 2 years, less than 2 years down the line, when we have just had elections and coalition or opposition political party have to fall short to CDC. And this is a problem with the opposition political parties in Liberia. And that will always be the problem with the opposition party in Liberia. The caller who just left the line said that it is not only with this opposition leader or parties right now. It has been the problem with opposition political parties. And they do not want to agree to that. And they will see if Dr. Weah decides to contest in 2023, defeating them again because some of them feel so indispensable. They feel that Alexander Cummings feel that they must have him because he has more money than the other people. And few weeks down the line, after the result would have been announced, they run to Prince Johnson and everybody begging him to endorse them so that they can be the winner of the party. The brother, Mr. Youngton, said something about opposition political parties having platforms and all of those stuff. How many Liberian people you see during election time that read platforms? They don't read no platforms. So you see, even when you talk about the CDC Propo agenda, there was no platform for that. There was nothing drawn up. So I just don't want to waste your time. I just want to agree with Mr. Doe and the other callers. Mr. Youngton, don't feel that we do not see we did not hear what you are saying. But on the larger scale, Liberian people in opposition do not have a drawn-up agenda to fight the sitting. I don't want to use the word fight, but to challenge present leadership, and that's period.
Thank you.
Until they can redefine that, they will never be viable to the Liberian people in terms of what we have today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Yonton, before you answer the question, I heard you saying that, are you saying currently the opposition is not viable, but they could be viable? Please speak to that before you answer the question.
My position has been the opposition can be and could be viable.
But now they are not.
And I said that given the challenges that has been, elucidated by some of the callers, which I acknowledge, the issue of unity within the coalition is something that is lacking. And
no, let me get this clear. You say currently they are not viable, but they can be.
Yeah, they are not viable, and we are not having election today. So I'm speaking within the context of projecting for 2020 and 2023 election. So they could be viable by the time we are already landed by 2023 to participate in phase we are in that is already having an issue with governance and incompetence.
Thank you.
That was my position.
Thank you.
I do acknowledge all of the callers concerned, the issue of the disunity, not only among supporters of political opposition collaborating parties, demonstrated and evident by what we read on Facebook, but also even political leaders themselves are not living and surviving by the true tenet of the fairness and transparency under which the umbrella under which we think. These are challenges. Could these challenges be overcome? I say yes, because there is still room. There is still room within between now to 2023 for them to mend fences. And this is where we look forward to the opposition consolidating its own game plan, its own ground plan, ensuring that there is a harmony with all of the different programs. Because remember, they all did not contest election in 2017 as a unified force. They contested separately. So each one of the political parties that are under this umbrella group called the CPP had their own agenda. So we look forward to them consolidating that agenda. Let's bring the 4R on the one national agenda to project towards 2023. Let's bring the strong economic pillar on which Alexander Cummings ran on the one national agenda to project towards 2023. Let's bring the agenda and the vision of Bernard Ure on agriculture that he ran on, to project towards 2023. And this is how we look forward to it. But in terms of viability, defined by my brother Edward, and he limited the scope of what viability is. And thanks to Juka, who expanded the scope for him. But his argument has always been the opposition must have a budget, the opposition must speak, and they are not speaking to his satisfaction. Therefore, they are not a viable institution or instrument through which we can project change.
Thank you. Let me go to
let me come in, please. Let me respond to what he said, that my brother said.
Hold on. I want to go to Mr. Amara, from who's joining us from Freetown, Sierra Leone, to give us the news rundown from the motherland. Mr. Amara, welcome to Focus on Liberia. You are watching, before you give the news roundup, I know you are watching, and what's your take?
Well, thank you very much. I listened keenly to all of their submissions. I think opposition leaders or parties in West Africa are no different from what is happening in Liberia. It just sounds sometimes funny, unbelievable, and absolutely unexpected. Because I know Liberia, I know Sierra Leone, Guinea, and some of these West African countries. I do follow their international event happening. If you want to talk about opposition parties in Africa, especially like sub-Saharan countries, we expect that the opposition parties should be like a government in the waiting. And they should be people who are watchdogs. They should checkmate whatsoever thing the government is doing. Unfortunately, this so-called opposition in Africa, they only come in very active when it is during time of campaign, canvass, or electioneering process. Just after that, they die down. Having said that, let's critically look at Liberia as a case study. And you watch at the type of opposition that we're having over there. Are they viable enough to contest for the presidential position in Liberia? What is their human resource? And when you watch at the politics, is a game, but it's a game of professionals. And if you are involved into politics, you must be a genius who can adequately convince the populace to see your support. But look, when you have an opposition who is a dog that barks but does not bite, you find it very difficult to prove your way. Most of this opposition who found themselves in parliament, they are not vocal, they are not articulative, and they hardly come out to repel and challenge the government on certain decisions. We expect an opposition to be absolutely active. And I heard somebody talking about the budget. When we are talking about a budget, the opposition having budget, doesn't mean that if you have a budget that you go and plan for government. Rather, you should be very, very robust, strong, and objective when each time a government comes with their annual budget to present for certain programs. You should be there to say this budget was inflated. If it were our own government, this is what we have done, which is what we didn't have done, and these are some of the things that we shouldn't include. So I think for Liberia to first have a constructive, strong opposition against the Weah-led government, one, they shouldn't, because I'm seeing a lot of multi-parties in Liberia. But you watch at it, you need to have the human resource in Liberia that should even somewhat to opposition party. They are just few, and they have a lot of political parties in Liberia, and they need a strong opposition to unite together, gather the few human resources that they have to come and contest against the Weah-led government. Unfortunately, they are not doing that. Everybody just power mongering, and the few who are even involved into politics, I hardly see them attacking issues against the government. Rather, most of the time that they just attack infinitesimal issues that are too little to be accounted for. We need a strong opposition who can be able to repel the government adequately and make certain submissions that we be able to look at. But so far, so good. Africa oppositions, they only unite when, or they only tend to even show themselves when it is time for canvas electioneering or campaign. With exception, I hardly see them do anything. I think the best way for Liberia opposition to actually be able to outstate the Weah-led government is for them to gang up together, look for the best human resource among themselves so that they can contest against the Weah-led administration. As far as I'm concerned, even the man who is speaking up for the opposition, he is more probabilistic. It's not too certain. It's more probabilistic. What they could be viable. So if this is the second year the man is into the administration, and I think by 2023, election will be contested into Liberia. If the opposition cannot come together, gather the few human resources and look at Weah's weakness into his government to try to depopularize him to the public, will be very difficult for them to win the election. Having said that, let me just take a rundown of some of the important development that are actually happening in Africa. We are going to start with the north, where we have the Egyptian government led by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He just a few years ago, a blogger was caught. Just after the Morsi-led government, the Muslim Brotherhood that actually won the election by them in 2012 to 2013 by the name of Morsi. Morsi was actually dethroned through popular demonstration that they wanted to create a Muslim Brotherhood party into Egypt that may not support a secular state, and Egypt is not willing to undergo any religious state or a state that will support Sharia law. So through a popular demonstration, the man was dethroned. He's already dead now after he lost his life in prison. So a blogger was caught who was actually trying to castigate the government. And he was released a few days ago, but later on he was arrested, saying that he still had the intention to do what he was arrested for. And the Human Rights International, other groups are actually calling for the release of that particular gentleman. But yet the government of Egypt is to give their response to him. And in the southern part of Africa, we have Mozambique. Elections were contested there on the past Tuesday. The election results are almost already out. The Electoral Commission has released 76% of the results for the ruling party. That is the Frelimo party has been in power since Mozambique gained independence from Portugal. Throughout, they have been in power. They have the main opposition party into Mozambique, that's the Renamo, and the Frelimo and Renamo used to have war between themselves. But the Renamo is not actually contesting the election result being released in favor of Philip Gusip, that is the present president of Mozambique, who is leading the Frelimo party. But the movement for democratic change in Mozambique are actually crying foul, and they are saying they're not going to accept the result. Then coming to us, West Africa here, in Guinea, a few days ago, we had a demonstration against the dictator, a Democrat who has already been changed into Alpha Conde. Around 7 protesters were killed, 70 injured, and a lot of others were shot, but yet they are gone accounted for. The opposition is still crying foul that over 10 people were killed, while is only accounted for 10. For 7. Now they went into court. They are demanding that if they are found guilty, they should be sent to 10 years imprisonment each. Why the opposition is asking that the case should be dismissed, because these people we are only protesting for their right. They have the right to protest against Alpha Conde, because Alpha Conde intends to amend the constitution, call for a referendum so that he can run for another 5 years time in office. And it was actually expected that the professor, by in education, he would have been the best person to come back with to put Guinea on this trajectory of democracy. Unfortunately, he has decided to follow or to swim with the old folks into Guinea, and it is very, very difficult how they managed to solve this particular problem. In Mali, we all know we have the tribal rebels in the north. The tribal rebels are actually fighting against the government. They want to create a type of secular state of Nigeria, but it's very difficult. On yesterday, which was Saturday, the French forces that are actually in Mali helping to keep peace, helping to enforce peace in the northern part of the country. According to them, they repelled 70 tribal rebels who had wanted to come and attack Timbuktu and capture some, but the rebel group are actually denying of having such thing like that. But there is a kind of controversy between on which statistic to believe. They are saying that if ever casualties are to be involved in such thing, then this is instead of them. So far, so good. These are some of the major developments that have taken place in Africa.
Thank you so much. Let me go to my last caller for the night. Caller, your name and where you call from?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Good evening, folks.
Your name and where you calling from?
Are you hearing me? Okay,
Yes,
my name is Dave Ja. Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I said my name is Dave Ja, and I'm calling from Philadelphia.
Dave, welcome
yes,
to Focus on your question or comments.
Great, thank you. Yeah, a few comments, and maybe your panelists can respond to my comment. I listened to the discussion. I think it's a very healthy one. I enjoy it, but I have a kind of a theory regarding the oppositions and what we are discussing. I think part of our problem in Liberia, or part of the problem, we look at these institutions as opposition parties. I think part of the reason is that these are not fully political parties, in my own estimation, but a collection of just individuals. A person organizes his own political party, invests his money, and he has his own agenda. And we, the Liberian people, go around them without our own involvement and our own investment, and we want them to be molded into the way that we want them to operate. I think that's part of our problem in Liberia, because these are not institutions that have people forming part of that, but just individual investment. They put their own money into it, therefore their commitment is to themselves and not to the broader population. So I believe if we Liberians want to have a vibrant opposition, we should also become part and parcel of those institutions so that they can become broad-based. We also have to invest into those institutions so that we can become part of them and we can own them. But if we just expect that Mr. Cummings will pump his money into a party and then he will be generous enough, I mean, hopefully we want to see that kind of a leader who is concerned about the forward movement of the country and will recruit talents around. And even if he's not the head of that political party, but he sees some talents into another person, and we can invest into those people. But that is not the case with our opposition as I see it. I think these are just bunch of institutions, not fully institutions, but something that just circle around an individual who has his own selfish motive. And that motive is for them to acquire power. If we look around right now and you ask some of those political parties that if you were to get to power, just as Mr. Doe was saying, what is your platform? What are your plans? How will you address this? How will you address that? And even apart from that, if we were to ask them, if you were to get to power right now, from the tip of your fingers, give me 5 or 6 individuals that can hold strategic positions, people that you have worked with, that you have interacted with, and you know that they have the capability to perform. Most of those political parties will not be able to produce that. They are just waiting. An individual is just waiting to get to power, and then he will begin the recruitment process. So as one of your speakers said, I think it was Martha also, that the CDC faced the same problem. They got to power and they did not have an idea as to what to do, because these institutions are just built around single individuals and not on the broad spectrum of people. I think that's part of our problem we face in Liberia. And we, the Liberian people, if we really want genuine change, we have to be part and parcel of those things. And we should put our money into what we believe in that will take the country forward. Once we become part and parcel and we become part of the decision-making apparatus, I do not think that Mr. Cummings or Mr. Ure, they will just have a stranglehold on those kind of institutions. And so that's the point I was trying to make. And thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Dave. I think we have kind of exceeded our time tonight. So I'll go back to you, Mr. Asoni, to close up before we go to our guests for your final statement.
Thank you, Dennis, and to our listener in cyberspace, we want to say thank you for being with us throughout the broadcast. We have had Mr. Doe and we have Mr. Larama Yonton. You will see Mr. Edward Amar there, our West African correspondent who usually gives us update. It has been an interactive and heated conversation. And I really enjoy it. We had serious disagreement, but it was civil. And this is how any political conversation of this nature should be, that people disagree, they're passionate, they know what they're talking about, and they are willing to go all out to explain their position. That is what our guests have been able to give our listeners, especially those of them who have been following us in cyberspace online. Gentlemen, we are coming to the close of our broadcast for today. We will now take your closing statements, and then we will wrap it up from here. We will be starting with you, Mr. Doe. Well, throughout the conversation, you've been very clear, and you said that the opposition does not represent what we describe as viable alternative at all, because there are no structures and they are not effective. And you gave all your reason. They're not doing things like budget to showcase how they would do it differently. Nothing of such. So our last question to you, that you will close on, is what are some credits you are willing to give to the opposition, if there have been any, in terms of holding this government accountable? And then you can close on, and we'll go to Yonton.
Well, the credit that I would give them is the fact that they are trying to unite as one opposition, even though it's still a work in process. And also, I will also give them the credit that they have, taken certain positions, but they're not consistent on those positions. They will speak maybe a day or two and then drop the topic, whatsoever. So I will give them that credit for their inconsistency in speaking. That said, as I stated earlier, the opposition is not viable. We don't have a strong opposition. I don't think too that we even have an opposition, because the way I know opposition to exist, or what opposition means in a democratic setting, is that they are a watchdog. They hold the ruling party accountable. They checkmate them, whatsoever. And then also too, they put forth, their ideas or their policy as to how they would do this and things differently. I don't see this coming from our political opposition.
And so what would be your recommendation? And then we'll go to Yunton.
My recommendation would be that those things that I spoke about, we need to see them engage in the public more. We need to see them, challenging the Weah administration. The Weah administration have made so many mistakes that they would have run away, they would have grilled the administration up. And also to need to see the public need to see a blueprint of their budget policy, what they would do differently in their spending, compared to this administration, whether they will spend their budget will have more priority on healthcare, education, those kind of things. And those are the kind of policy that need to be talking about. Those should be the talking points, on healthcare, education, those things that we is lacking on, so they can push that forward. And then the spending, they should do some spending cuts, salaries. We need to cut salary, they will cut salary, all those kind of things. Those are the talking points that people want to hear from the opposition. And I don't know whether the opposition have, people that can speak on its behalf, whatsoever. Whether they have, it boils down to the same thing as structure. They're not structured, they're not organized, to have people to speak on those issues, consistently, or write on those issues consistently, engage the public. They're not doing that. Those are some of the recommendations I'll give them. Organize and structure. Have people to speak on those issues. The standard bearer cannot speak on the issue all the time. The party leadership cannot speak on the issues all the time. You have other people in the party that can speak on those issues. In terms also the caller mentioned about funding. I don't know how the political party, they don't do fundraising, those kind of things. They need to organize themselves by doing some fundraising. Once they start speaking on this issue, people will be willing to come to the fundraising and spend their money, give them their money, because they will find them to be serious organization, but they're not doing those kind of things.
Thank you, Mr. Doe. Listening, that was the voice of Mr. Doe, one of our panelists here tonight. Mr. Yunton, we are about to close. We want to hear from you. You have been very articulate on the topic tonight. You made it clear what the opposition has been able to do. You made it clear that they can and they could become that alternative the Liberian people wish to see. You also acknowledge that there are lapses, the fact that there are some conflict in there, mean that a lot of work need to be done. What are some of those things you want to see in the opposition that will present it to be that viable alternative that you want to see, and what are those things, and what would be your recommendation to the opposition bloc, because they got to get this thing together if they really want to be able to represent the Liberian people come next election.
Firstly, I would like to see that the opposition, beyond coming together in a unified way to project the CPP as a platform, to begin an exercise of harmonizing and unifying their respective platforms with which individual members of the collaborating party contested on in the 2017 election. There are a lot of dividing lines between their philosophy when it comes to pointing towards the presidency and being elected. And key priorities and focus area has to be highlighted in a new opposition style manifesto that can take the opposition towards a fundamentally new level. I also want to see unity beyond the four political collaborating opposition parties to the inclusion of other political opposition parties that contested in the election, regardless, no matter how small that number could be. They are very important to the onward march of the opposition community, because as we speak, the government has failed the Liberian people, but the Liberian people is still looking for that new national sensation that is to replace the Weah-led government. And we also want to see that the opposition lower their hearts in terms of their ambition. Coming together does not necessarily mean, or contesting previous election does not necessarily mean that you are a or the candidate to contest on the CPP ticket. It could be anyone who can be chosen. In fact, not even from among the rank and file of the four political leaders that we look forward to. We need to see a new breed of political leaders. We need to see new ideas. And I welcome Brother Doe to also form an active part of an opposition political party. He has a lot of, great ideas, a lot of great gift buried within him. Just writing on Facebook and criticizing the opposition is not a way of taking action. Get involved. Join one of the collaborating political parties. Join one of the opposition movement. And make that difference. And let that difference be seen in a structural way, consistent with the structure and the things you want to see in the life of the opposition. So these are basic things that we want to see. We want to see more cohesiveness and unity among supporters of the collaborating parties. We want to see an expansion of the collaborating political parties to include other opposition movements and other opposition political parties that contested the election. We want to see a new, manifesto fundamentally that guide the process of the opposition national engagement in the discourse, whether it's on education and healthcare, and even infrastructure development and agriculture. Today, as we speak, the agriculture sector account for almost 74% of Liberia's workforce. The service sector account for almost half of our national GDP. How can we move, to ensuring that effectiveness and job creations, are created within those sectors, so that our young people who are now referred to as local, I refer to them as disadvantaged young people, are able to be, mainstream into the private sector effectively, and they can become responsible citizens. How can we reduce the number of poor citizen incarceration across various cells and prison centers? These are things that we look forward to the opposition taking lead in terms of the national discourse, alongside with consistently scrutinizing some of the government projected policy, especially with respect to the Pro agenda for prosperity and development. The budget, we can speak on it and consistently speak on it, but to say that we have to develop our own budget, even around the world, governments are the ones who are responsible to do that. Opposition as a political party can project programs that they think can benefit the mass of our people and allocate, funding streams that are associated with those programs. But it's not the role of the opposition to create budget, because we are not a part of government. All right, so those are things that we want to see, and it's been a very unique conversation. I want to thank my brother for coming and taking up the bold step to have this interaction.
Again, that was the voice of Mr. Larama Yanton, one of our panelists here, who has been trying to answer the question, does the opposition represent a viable alternative to the current administration? Dennis, it's over to you. And folks, my name is Anthony Sier. I have been the guest co-host here, focused on Liberia. Dennis, it's over to you.
I want to appreciate you, Mr. Sier, for your work. It's been a very, very interactive evening talking to all of you. Thank you, Mr. Doe. Thank you, Mr. Yonton. I want to thank all our audience from across the globe. One thing about opposition that I've said repeatedly, in 2008, I wrote this article, what distinguishes Liberia's political parties? Is it just faces? That was in 2008 as we were going towards election 2012. So what's happening most of the time, and most of the callers alluded to that, is clearly from the discussion tonight, as it stands as of tonight, the opposition is not vibrant or is not viable. And we have a history of opposition parties not being viable. Even ruling parties, as long as they are out of power, they disintegrate. We see that with the TWP, with the NDPL, with the NPP, and now the Unity Party is hanging on the former Vice President Joseph Newman Boakai. So there are a lot of things that really needs to be done. One of the callers talk about the funding. As much as one person is paying the bulk of the money, well, if you don't want me, I'll go home with my ball. So that has been the issue. So if we want to see the viability, we ourselves need to attach ourselves to parties, invest in them. And so, because if we put our money where our mouth is, then we have mouth to talk. But if you allow Mr. Cummings, for instance, alone to shoulder all the cost, well, if you don't want him, he's going to go home with his ball. Or if you want Mr. Uri or any other person to do that. So right now, what we see is right after election, we have this other title called political leaders, meaning lifetime standard bearers. So political parties are not grooming anybody while they are in power. Until that one figure disappears, there's going to be nobody who's going to. So we know the standard bearer even before we go for convention. So I don't think that's a way to go when it comes to our political party. And it is very clear that our political parties need to be more forceful on policy issues. Show us your plan. Have website that we can go to read what you're going to do differently besides talking or besides being reactive to whatever government policy is. Show us how you will do it differently. And also be able to write op-eds, come on, focus on Liberia, join our economic forum and talk about economy. Okay, most of the time, our opposition and even the ruling party, they go on these talk shows where they are in their own echo chamber. So you go on a talk show that already support you, they're going to say yes, where 90% of the callers going to agree with you. And so they go there and regurgitate what they already said in their chat rooms. That's not the way to go. If you want to be heard, if you want to sell a product, sell it to the people who don't even like you. But instead, opposition parties go to the echo chamber and they're where they talk. They don't go after those who don't like them or those who are not in favor of them. Same with ruling party. Everybody goes play to their own suit. And I don't think that's how we can ensure a vibrant democracy. It's been a very wonderful night. That's my little pep talk at the end of the broadcast. I want to appreciate all of you for the wonderful, wonderful debate tonight. On Wednesday, we're going to continue our investment, that Liberia diaspora investments. That's going to continue on Wednesday as part of our economic forum. I don't want you to miss it. So please keep your dial here. Focus on Liberia. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Watch us every Wednesday, every Saturday, every Friday for our debate, and also every Sunday for our regular focus on Liberia. Until then, my name is Dennis Jah on behalf of all the crew here at Focus on Liberia.
Liberia, we are one people. Liberia, let us